Okay, let's jump right into Mrs. Doe's situation. She came in via the emergency room on June 25th, 2025. Her main complaints were worsening shortness of breath and this productive cough, and importantly, it had been going on for about 7 days.
Right, that 7-day history is significant. It tells you this isn't just a sudden thing, it's been building. And her background is key here. She has a known history of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD we often call it, with a forced expiratory volume in 1 second, her FEV1 down at 45% predicted. So baseline, she already has pretty significant airflow limitation.
45% predicted FEV1.
Okay, and her last exacerbation requiring oral steroids was only 3 months ago. So she's definitely prone to these flare-ups. One other detail, no fever on admission.
Got it. Underlying severe chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, recent exacerbation history, what was she actually taking day to day before this?
Her routine meds were tiotropium/olvidaterol, that's a combination long-acting bronchodilator, salbutamol as needed for quick relief, aspirin, and atorvastatin. Pretty standard stuff.
Standard, but clearly not quite enough to stave off this event. So she arrives in the ER. What did those initial vital signs look like?
The vitals. They really painted a clear picture. Temperature was 37.2 degrees Celsius, so like we said, no fever. Heart rate, 98 beats per minute, a bit tachycardic. Respiratory rate was up 26 breaths per minute. That's showing significant effort. Blood pressure, 138 over 86 millimeters of mercury, stable enough, but maybe reflecting some stress. And the big one, oxygen saturation was 88% on room air.
88%. That's it. Yeah, that immediately grabs your attention.
It absolutely does. That level of hypoxemia tells you straight away she's in significant respiratory compromise and needs oxygen support promptly.
Okay, so we've got the history, the meds she was on, those concerning vitals. What about the physical exam? What did you actually see and hear at the bedside?
Well, listening to her chest, you'd hear quite prominent wheezing, both inspiratory and expiratory, bilaterally. Classic sign of that airflow obstruction getting worse. She also had prolonged expiration again, typical for obstructive lung disease, that difficulty getting air out. And diminished breath sounds down at the lung bases, suggesting maybe some air trapping or just poor air entry there. Also important, no peripheral edema. That helps steer us away from thinking acute heart failure is the main issue.
Okay, a very consistent picture building up. What did the lab work add to this? Any confirmations or refinements?
The labs gave us some objective markers. Her white blood cell count was 11.5 K per microliter.
Okay, elevated.
Elevated, yes, and with a neutrophil predominance. That plus her C-reactive protein, being up at 45 milligrams per liter, strongly suggests an inflammatory process, likely infectious. Then the chest x-ray showed hyperinflation, no surprise, given her known chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. But crucially, no new infiltrates.
So not a clear pneumonia driving it.
Exactly. It points more towards a worsening of her underlying disease, likely triggered by an infection,
right,
rather than a brand new pneumonia itself.
All right, so let's synthesize all of this. The history, the symptoms over a week, the vitals showing hypoxemia and tachypnea, the exam findings, the inflammatory markers in the labs, and the x-ray. What's the initial assessment?
Putting it all together, the assessment from Ms. Doe is pretty clear: an acute exacerbation of her chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And the trigger is most likely an underlying infection. The rationale comes from that increased sputum production she reported, the elevated white blood cell count and C-reactive protein, the wheezing. It all fits. And of course, that significant hypoxemia, the low oxygen level, is a major part of the acute picture.
Okay, assessment nailed down. Let's pivot to what our listeners really need: the management plan. How do we start tackling this?
First things first, oxygen therapy. The plan is supplemental oxygen, aiming to keep her oxygen saturation, her SpO2, between 90% and 92%. And I really have to emphasize, we need to titrate this very carefully.
Right, that 90 to 92% target isn't arbitrary, is it? Why that specific range for someone like Mrs. Doe?
No, it's very specific. You see, while the hypoxemia definitely needs treatment, she needs that oxygen. Many patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease retain carbon dioxide. If you give them too much oxygen, you can actually blunt their respiratory drive and make that carbon dioxide retention, hypercapnia, even worse. It's a known risk. So keeping the saturation in that 90 to 92% sweet spot generally provides adequate oxygenation without significantly increasing the risk of worsening hypercapnia. It's a careful balancing act.
Makes sense. A critical balance. After getting the oxygen sorted, what's next for her breathing?
Next up are the bronchodilators. We need to open up those airways. The plan is to continue her usual long-acting bronchodilators, but also increase the frequency of her short-acting agents. So we'd consider nebulized short-acting beta agonists like salbutamol, maybe 2.5 milligrams every 4 to 6 hours. And add a short-acting muscarinic antagonist like ipratropium, perhaps 0.5 milligrams also every 4 to 6 hours via nebulizer.
And why the step up, and specifically using nebulizers in this acute phase?
Well, maximizing bronchodilation is just fundamental in an acute exacerbation. We need to relieve that airflow obstruction. Nebulized therapy can often deliver the medication more effectively than, say, a standard inhaler when someone is acutely short of breath and maybe not coordinating their breathing well. It ensures better drug deposition deep in the airways when they need it most.
Got it. Maximizing delivery. Okay, what about inflammation? Are systemic corticosteroids part of this picture?
Oh, absolutely. Systemic corticosteroids are a cornerstone here. The standard recommendation would be oral prednisone, say 40 milligrams daily, for 5 days.
5 days. That duration seems quite specific now compared to maybe older protocols. What's the evidence behind that shorter course?
That's right. The evidence has really evolved. We know systemic steroids are highly effective. They reduce that airway inflammation, they shorten the recovery time, improve lung function, reduce relapse risk. But studies have shown that a 5-day course, like the 40 milligrams of prednisone daily, is generally just as effective as longer courses for most uncomplicated exacerbations. And, importantly, the shorter duration means fewer side effects, less risk of hyperglycemia, mood changes, infections, etc. So it optimizes that risk-benefit balance.
Better outcomes with potentially fewer problems. That's good practice evolution. Now, we suspected an infection was the trigger. Do antibiotics come into play?
Yes. Based on her presentation, antibiotics are indicated. The plan would be to initiate broad-spectrum antibiotics. A common choice, for example, might be amoxicillin clavulanate, maybe 875 milligrams / 125 milligrams, taken twice daily for about 7 days.
And what specifically about Ms. Doe's case pushes us towards antibiotics? What are the triggers for that decision?
It's based on cardinal symptoms. The guidelines generally recommend antibiotics for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease exacerbations if the patient has increased sputum purulence, meaning thicker, colored phlegm, along with at least one other symptom, like increased shortness of breath or increased sputum volume. Ms. Doe reported both worsening shortness of breath and a productive, likely purulent cough. Plus, she had those elevated inflammatory markers, the white blood cells and C-reactive protein. So she clearly meets the criteria suggesting a bacterial component that warrants antibiotic treatment. They're also indicated if a patient needs mechanical ventilation, though she's not there yet.
Okay, so that covers oxygen, bronchodilators, steroids, and antibiotics, the core treatments. Is there a final piece to this acute management puzzle?
Yes, and it's ongoing. Monitoring. Close monitoring is absolutely essential. This means keeping a very close eye on her respiratory status, her work of breathing, respiratory rate, her oxygen saturation levels, of course, and her mental status. We need to be vigilant for any signs of respiratory fatigue, like using accessory muscles or worsening hypoxemia despite treatment, or any confusion.
Why is that constant vigilance so non-negotiable here?
Because deterioration can happen quickly in these situations. Respiratory failure can sneak up fast. Early detection of worsening status is vital. It allows us to intervene before things get really bad. That might mean escalating to non-invasive ventilation, like BiPAP, or in severe cases, intubation and mechanical ventilation. So monitoring allows for that timely, potentially life-saving step-up in care.
Right, staying ahead of the curve. So we've walked through Mrs. Doe's presentation and a really structured management plan for this acute chronic obstructive pulmonary disease exacerbation. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this breakdown helps you continue to apply critical thinking and evidence-based care in your practice every day.